Hey, Ara, tell me a story about how King Arthur became king in medieval times.
All right, let's dive into a tale woven from the mists of time, where legends were born under stormy skies and the clash of steel echoed through ancient forests. This is the story of how Arthur, a boy of no particular renown, became the High King of Britain, wielder of Excalibur, and the heart of Camelot. In the days when Britain was a fractured land, its kingdom splintered by war and ambition, the realm teetered on the edge of chaos. Uther Pendragon, the last true king, had died under mysterious circumstances, leaving no heir that anyone could agree upon. The lords bickered, their swords drawn more often than their wits, and the people suffered under the weight of endless strife. It was said that only a miracle could unite the land, and the land, it seemed, was fresh out of those. But in a forgotten corner of the realm, in a humble manor, tucked among rolling hills and whispering oaks, destiny was stirring. Arthur was a lanky boy of 15 summers, with unruly chestnut hair that fell into his eyes and a quiet strength that few noticed. He was the ward of Sir Ector, a gruff but kind-hearted knight who raised Arthur alongside his own son, Kay, in a modest estate far from the grand courts of lords. Arthur wasn't much for boasting, unlike Kay, who could spin a tale of his own valor before breakfast, but he had a knack for seeing the world differently. Where others saw a muddy field, Arthur saw a place where courage could take root. Where others saw a broken sword, he saw a chance to forge something new. He spent his days tending horses, sparring with Kay, and listening to the stories of old Merlin, the strange wanderer who sometimes lingered near the manor, his eyes glinting like he knew secrets the stars themselves had whispered. Now Merlin was a mystery wrapped in a riddle, cloaked in shadow. Some called him a wizard, others a madman. His beard was long and silver, his robes tattered yet oddly pristine, and his staff seemed to hum with a life of its own. He'd appear unannounced, tell cryptic tales of dragons and destinies, then vanish into the mist. Arthur liked him, though. There was a warmth in Merlin's gaze, like he saw something in the boy that even Arthur didn't know was there. It was winter, the kind that bit at your bones when word spread of a strange event in Londinium. A sword had appeared, driven deep into a massive stone in the courtyard of the great church. No one knew how it got there. No mason claimed it, no smith forged it. The blade gleamed like liquid starlight, its hilt carved with runes that seemed to shift when you looked too long. Above it, carved into the stone, were words that sent chills through the crowd. Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone is rightwise king, born of all Britain. The news swept through the land like wildfire. Lords, knights, and pretenders flocked to Londinium, each certain they were the chosen one. Tournaments were declared, a grand spectacle to distract from the grim reality of a kingless realm. Sir Ector, ever practical, decided to take Kay, who'd just been knighted, to test his mettle in the jousts. Arthur, as always, went along as squire, carrying Kay's gear and keeping his head down. Londinium was a cacophony of color and chaos. Banners snapped in the wind, crimson and gold and sapphire, each bearing the sigils of proud houses. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts, sweat, and the sharp tang of metal. Knights in polished armor strutted like peacocks, while merchants hawked charms and pilgrims prayed for a miracle. Arthur, lugging Kay's shield, felt small in the press of bodies, but couldn't tear his eyes from the sword in the stone. It stood in the churchyard, surrounded by a throng of hopefuls, burly warlords, cunning barons, even a few wide-eyed boys not much older than him. One by one, they tried their hand. They heaved, cursed, prayed, and wept, but the sword didn't budge. It was as if the stone itself mocked them. Kay, brash and eager, competed in the tournament with middling success, but when his sword snapped in a clumsy bout, he sent Arthur to fetch a replacement from their camp. Arthur, ever dutiful, trudged through the snowy streets, only to find their tent ruined. Kay's spare blade was gone. Panic crept into his chest. Kay would be furious, and Ector would be disappointed. Desperate, Arthur remembered the sword in the stone. No one was pulling it out, right? Maybe, just for today, he could borrow it for Kay. It was a foolish thought, born of a boy's logic, but Arthur wasn't one to overthink. The churchyard was quieter now, the crowd thinned by the chill dusk. The sword gleamed under the fading light, its runes almost whispering. Arthur approached, heart thudding. He didn't think of kings or prophecies, only of Kay's scowl if he returned empty-handed. He wrapped both hands around the hilt. It was warm, oddly so, like it had been waiting. He tugged, expecting resistance, but the blade slid free with a sound like a sigh, smooth as silk from a sheath. Arthur stumbled back, the sword light in his hands, its balance perfect, as if it were an extension of his arm. For a moment, he stood frozen, staring at the blade, then at the empty stone. "Well," he muttered, "that's unexpected." He hurried back to Kay, sword in hand, but when Kay saw it, his eyes widened, then narrowed. "Where'd you get that?" he demanded. Arthur, sheepish, explained. Kay's face paled, then flushed with ambition. "Give it here," he said, snatching the sword. "I'll show it to Father." Kay ran to Ector, claiming he'd pulled the blade himself. Ector, no fool, looked from the sword to Kay's shifty eyes, and then to Arthur, who stood quietly, head bowed. "Boy," Ector said softly, "tell me the truth." Arthur did. The words spilled out, how he'd only meant to borrow it, how it came free so easily. Ector's face was unreadable. He knelt before Arthur, something no knight had ever done, and said, "Show me." They returned to the churchyard, the sword now back in the stone, for Merlin, unseen, had ensured it was replaced. The crowd gathered again, murmuring. Ector tried to pull it, then Kay, then a dozen others. The sword didn't move. Finally, Ector turned to Arthur. "Your turn, lad." Arthur hesitated. The eyes of lords, knights, and commoners bore into him. He felt small, unworthy, but something in the sword's gleam called to him. He stepped forward, took the hilt, and pulled. The blade sang as it slid free, and a gasp rippled through the crowd. Merlin appeared then, stepping from the shadows, his staff tapping the ground. "The king is found," he declared, voice like thunder. The lords protested, their pride wounded, but Merlin's gaze silenced them. "This is no trick," he said. "The stone speaks truth. Arthur is Uther's son, hidden for his safety, raised in humble shadow to forge a heart worthy of a crown." The truth unraveled like a tapestry. Merlin revealed how he'd spirited the infant Arthur away at Uther's behest, protecting him from assassins who sought to end the Pendragon line. Ector, sworn to secrecy, had raised him as his own. The lords, grudging at first, began to see the boy not as a squire, but as a symbol, a chance to end the wars. One by one, they knelt, though some did so with clenched jaws. Arthur stood, sword in hand, bewildered but resolute. The weight of the blade was nothing compared to the weight of destiny now settling on his shoulders. Merlin leaned close, whispering, "This is but the beginning, lad. Excalibur will guide you, but your heart must lead." And so, under a sky streaked with the first stars of a new era, Arthur, the boy who'd never dreamed of thrones, became the king who would forge Camelot, a beacon of hope in a dark age. The story doesn't end here, of course. There were trials, betrayals, and glories yet to come. Knights, quests, and a round table where all were equal. But that night, as Arthur held Excalibur and felt the eyes of a nation upon him, he knew one thing. He'd pulled not just a sword from a stone, but a kingdom from the ashes. And so began the legend of the once and future king.
Tell me about the betrayals that you mentioned earlier that King Arthur had to endure later on when he was king.
All right, let's plunge back into the tapestry of Camelot, where the golden dream of Arthur's reign was tested by shadows and treachery. The betrayals King Arthur faced as the High King of Britain were like cracks in a mighty oak, each one threatening to splinter the unity he'd fought so hard to forge. These weren't just betrayals of trust, but wounds to the heart of Camelot's ideals: honor, loyalty, and love. Let's unravel the threads of 3 great betrayals that haunted Arthur's reign, painting the scenes with the grit and glimmer of a kingdom teetering on the edge. The first betrayal came from within the heart of Camelot's inner circle, from a knight whose name would echo through time: Sir Lancelot du Lac. Lancelot was Arthur's greatest champion, a knight unmatched in prowess, with dark eyes that held both fire and sorrow. His armor gleamed like polished obsidian, and his sword, Arondight, sang through the air in tourneys and battles alike. He arrived in Camelot years after Arthur pulled Excalibur from the stone, drawn by tales of a king who valued justice over power. Arthur welcomed him, seeing in Lancelot a brother in arms, a man whose skill could strengthen the Round Table's dream of equality. They became fast friends, sharing laughter over mead in the great hall, where tapestries of dragons and stars hung heavy with the weight of history. But Lancelot's heart, noble as it was, carried a fatal flaw. His
Keep going.
fierce spirit, her auburn hair catching the torchlight like embers, her eyes sharp enough to see through a man's soul. Guinevere was more than a queen. She was the heart of Camelot, her wisdom guiding Arthur's court as much as his sword protected it. Lancelot tried to resist the pull of his heart, knowing the cost of such love. He rode out on perilous quests, slaying worms in the misty fells, rescuing maidens from cursed towers, hoping distance would dull his longing. But every return to Camelot brought him back to Guinevere's side, their glances lingering too long in the rose-scented gardens or across the polished oak of the Round Table. The affair began in stolen moments, a brush of hands in a shadowed corridor, whispered words under the guise of courtly courtesy. They fought it, both of them, bound by duty and love for Arthur. But love, like a river, carve its own path. Whispers spread through the court, carried by envious knights and sharp-eared maids. Sir Agravain, a sour man with a hunger for power, caught wind of their secret and saw a chance to fracture the table. He brought the rumor to Arthur, cloaking his malice and concern. Arthur, trusting and weary from years of war, refused to believe at first. He loved Lancelot like a brother, and Guinevere was his light. But doubt, once planted, grows like ivy. He ordered Merlin, now a rare presence in the court, to seek the truth through his mystic arts. Merlin, his face lined with the weight of foreknowledge, confirmed the affair with a heavy heart. Arthur's world cracked. He confronted Lancelot in the great hall, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and betrayal. The knight's confession was halting, his voice breaking as he knelt, Arundite laid before him. Guinevere wept, her crown glinting mockingly in the firelight. Arthur, torn between love and justice, banished Lancelot to his lands across the sea, and sentenced Guinevere to a cloister, though his heart ached to do it. The court was stunned. Camelot's unity began to fray. Lancelot's departure left a void, and whispers of division grew louder, like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. The second betrayal came from within Arthur's own blood, his sister, Morgan Le Fay. Morgan was a sorceress, her beauty as sharp as a blade, her raven hair falling like a curtain of night. She'd been raised alongside Arthur in the shadowed courts of their mother, Igraine, and though she loved her brother in her way, her heart burned with ambition and resentment. Merlin had taught her the old magics, the secrets of herbs and stars, but she craved power beyond his teachings. Morgan believed she, not Arthur, should rule Britain, her sorcery a match for any sword. She cloaked her schemes in smiles, attending court with gifts of enchanted trinkets, a goblet that never emptied, a cloak that warmed in winter's light. But in her hidden tower, surrounded by grimoires and flickering candles, she wove darker plans. Morgan's betrayal struck through Arthur's nephew, Sir Mordred, a knight with eyes like a wolf and a heart divided by loyalty and envy. Unknown to Arthur, Mordred was his son, born of a youthful indiscretion with Morgan before Arthur knew she was his sister, a secret Merlin kept to preserve the king's spirit. Morgan whispered poison into Mordred's ear, stoking his ambition. "You are Pendragon's true heir," she purred, her voice like velvet over steel. "Arthur is weak, bound by dreams that crumble. Take what is yours." She gifted Mordred a blade etched with runes, its edge sharp enough to cleave fate itself. Mordred bided his time, earning Arthur's trust while sowing discord. He spread lies that Arthur favored foreign knights, that the Round Table was a sham for Arthur's glory. When Lancelot's scandal broke, Mordred seized his chance, rallying disgruntled knights, Sir Agravain, Sir Gawain's bitter cousins, to his side. He accused Arthur of weakness, claiming the king's mercy toward Guinevere proved him unfit. Morgan's magic bolstered Mordred's charisma, her spells making his words burn in the hearts of the discontented. The Round Table splintered, knights choosing sides as Camelot's golden halls echoed with arguments instead of laughter. The final betrayal was the most devastating, for it came from Mordred's own hand. While Arthur was away, leading a campaign against Saxon raiders in the north, Mordred declared himself king. He stormed Camelot with his followers, his bear, a black dragon on red, snapping in the wind. The castle's walls, once alive with song, rang with the clash of steel. Mordred sat on Arthur's throne, his mother's laughter echoing in his mind. He spread word that Arthur had fallen, that Camelot needed a new ruler to survive the chaos. Some believed him, desperate for stability. Others resisted, loyal to the king who'd pulled the sword from the stone. When Arthur returned, his heart heavy with Lancelot's loss and Morgan's treachery, he faced a kingdom divided. The Battle of Camlan was the result, A brutal clash on a fog-shrouded plain where brother fought brother under a sky bruised with clouds. Arthur and Mordred met on the field, father and son unbeknownst to each other until Merlin's final anguish revelation. Arthur's spear found Mordred's heart, but not before Mordred's cursed blade struck Arthur down, its magic sapping the king's life. The field grew silent, littered with the fallen, Camelot's dream bleeding into the mud. As Arthur lay dying, tended by the last loyal knights, he gave Excalibur to Sir Bedivere with a final command. Bedivere hesitated, the sword's weight heavy with memory, but at last cast it into the misty waters, where a hand caught it, gleaming one last time before sinking. Arthur was borne to Avalon, an isle of eternal mist, where legends say he rests until Britain's need calls him again. These betrayals, Lancelot's love, Morgan's ambition, Mordred's rebellion, were the thorns that pierced Camelot's heart. Yet even in their shadow, Arthur's legacy endured, a testament to a king who dreamed of a better world, though it cost him everything. The Round Table was broken, but its stories, like stars in a darkened sky, still light the way for those who dare to hope.